So hopefully at this point you have Tails set up and ready to go on your computer, whether you're using it in a virtual box or on a USB drive. For this next section, we're going to go through the initial setup of Tails, give you a basic introduction to the interface and some of the tools there. And after that, we'll talk a little bit about encrypted persistence volumes and why they are important. So for this next section, we're going to hop back over to the desktop to our virtual box and continue from there. Alright, back over here on the desktop, we have our virtual box pulled up. So if everything is still set up correctly, we'll go ahead and just hit this start button and it should begin to boot the machine. Now, depending on your computer speed, it can take a minute to boot, so just be patient with it. However, if you are using this through the USB, it should be a lot quicker booting up. Pulled up on the other screen here, we'll throw it on this side. And there it is. To give you two options here at the beginning, it defaults to the normal Tails option, so that's the one you will want to use. The troubleshooting option is a bit more advanced, and unless you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't mess too much with that. We'll go ahead and just let it load. It is going to take a moment, so I'll go ahead and pause it until it is ready to go. Alright, and it finally did boot up, so now you can see the welcome screen for Tails, and we'll go ahead and go through some of the options it gives you on the startup. Now, of course, you don't need to mess with any of these options if you're not comfortable with using them or you don't want them, or you could just select no and hit login. Otherwise, hit yes and then hit forward, and that'll bring us to the extra options screen. The first one you can have here is the administrator password. This will allow you, of course, to put a password on the Tails, so you can lock people out. This is specifically useful when you have a persistence volume on your Tails application, and this just means that you can actually save data, because by default Tails won't save any documents you create or anything like that. However, if you have a persistence volume, it would save anything you put in there. So that can be useful for certain reasons like that. The next one we have here is MAC address spoofing. MAC address spoofing is useful for a few reasons, but it should be avoided as well for certain reasons. So generally a MAC address is just the it's like an IP address, except for it's based off of the hardware. So every device has a unique MAC address. In your home, obviously, if a computer connects to your internet, then disconnects, and then a different computer connects to the internet, they could have the same IP. However, they will never have the same MAC address. A MAC address is unique for every single one. So MAC address spoofing would be useful for a couple of different reasons. Say you're using your own computer on a public network and you don't have registration and don't have to actually log into anything, then this would be useful to just go right in. That way you can hide the fact that you're using your computer. On top of that, if you're using your own computer on a network that you use frequently, like a friend's house or at work or at university, and you have a strong relationship with that internet and your MAC address from your computer, you'll definitely want to spoof it just at this time and then go back to running it normally, and that will hide the fact that you're using Tails on this network. So the fact that you use Tails isn't hooked to your original MAC address. But you wouldn't want it on all of the time. Sometimes you wouldn't want to spoof your MAC address. Say you're using a public computer like internet cafe or library. If this computer is usually on the network and its MAC address changes, in some cases it'll make it look suspicious, and other cases it won't work at all. So it's important to remember that some networks limit access to certain MAC addresses. So that could definitely be a reason you wouldn't want to spoof it. And above and beyond that, using your own computer at home, you wouldn't really want to spoof your MAC address there. Your computer is already associated to the network, so MAC address spoofing for this situation is pretty much useless. But if you access your local network, if the access to your local network is restricted based on MAC addresses, it would be impossible to connect, so it definitely wouldn't work at all, so you wouldn't want it. But generally, it's useful to do, so you definitely want to use it if you ever plan to do anything illegal or illicit using the dark web. You definitely want to spoof your MAC address. And the next setting here allows you to basically set up a proxy. So if you need to set up a proxy to even connect to the normal internet, or for some reason they block Tails in your country or something, or block Tor in your country, that is, or something like that, you would actually need to configure the computer with a VPN, which you could select on here and then go log in, and you'll do all the settings like that. But if you're comfortable with how all these settings are, you can finally hit that login button and it will boot up to the main screen. We will go ahead and let it load up. It should only take a moment here, but of course this computer is not the fastest computer, which I did just to keep it kind of realistic to your situation. Nobody really has, or not everybody has, a super fast gaming desktop or something like that they can use for these kind of things. And I wouldn't recommend using your personal computer for Tails at all, if possible. But we'll go ahead and just let this load. I'll pause the video for now and we'll be back once it is done. Perfect, so the Tails desktop has finally loaded and now we are here. So this is the basic desktop. We'll kind of walk you through everything you need to know or see about this. One of the first things that came up is I had 3 messages, but we won't care about those right now. So the main things you should be aware is it is a pretty user-friendly interface. You can obviously click and drag items if you want. They don't really move freely, but remember, any changes you make once you unplug, they will go away. So the first thing you'll want to check out is the applications area. If you hit this little drop down, you'll see a lot of different options in terms of applications that come preloaded on Tails. You have some of the favorites, which is like the Tor browser, iStove, which is or iStove, I guess you would say, is a email client similar to Thunderbird, except it supports PGP. You have Pigeon Internet Messenger, which is an instant messenger, and you can actually configure it with OTR, or off-the-record messaging, so it would not keep track of you at all. You have KeyPass, which will actually store your keys made when you are doing the PGP process, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then you have the terminal, which you can actually run commands through. And those are the main ones we'll be discussing. Obviously, you have accessories like calculator, files. Obviously, you have some graphic ones you can do like Inkscape, GNU, LibreOffice. Under the internet, some important ones on here. Obviously, Electrum is very important. That's the Bitcoin wallet we're going to be using. And pretty much other than that, I mean, you could take a look at all of these. A lot of preloaded software and all of this stuff is safe to use on here and is considered very private and set up to work with Tails. So it's not bad to do. Then other than that, you have your places option here, which really gets you to navigate around the file system, so much like a Windows Explorer does, something like that. You can go to your documents and take a look at what documents you have in there, or your downloads, or anything like that. We'll kind of exit out of that then, and that's pretty much the places option. Now moving on to the right hand side, there's some interesting things over here. The first one is this actual keyboard. This is a virtual keyboard, and this just helps protect you against keyloggers, especially hardware keyloggers that can track which keys you press, because even with Tails booted up, they'll probably still track them. So this is useful in that case. Next to it here, you have the Open PGP applet. This is where you can encrypt and decrypt messages with your, or your public key, I should say, and then decrypt them with your private key. So you can see that very quick way to just kind of type something out and then copy it and encrypt it. Other than that, you have the little onion, which is actually the Tor browser, so we can hit that and just open a Tor circuit. It will actually open the Tor browser. We hit that keyboard there. Let's see, and you can just see here it gives us the option for which circuit to hit and all that, so we'll go ahead and just close that for now. We won't be messing with any of that. Another option here are more of the universal access options, so you can change some basic settings in Tails, high contrast, zoom, large text, the screen reader, things like that to help with accessibility and usability. And then over here we also have keyboard layouts, so this is going to change how your keyboard types. And then you have the time over here. This little box, if it will press on it here, is actually the information. It's actually this whole bar. So you have your sound, and then you have your you could see if it's charging or not, what status your battery has, and then you'll actually see your Wi-Fi up here once you connect to internet and everything like that. So that's basically the Tails desktop. I know it's kind of a brief overview overview, but there's not that much to take a look at or know about. It's pretty intuitive, definitely user-friendly, so shouldn't be too hard to navigate. In the next section, we're going to talk about the actual configuration of a persistence volume, so that way you can actually save files in here and you don't just make documents that get erased. And you can see under this section where I hit the settings option, lots of options under there. It's based off of a Linux distro, but you can see if you use a Mac, it kind of looks very similar to the way a Mac is laid out as well. So other than that, there's not much to know about the interface of Tails. We'll definitely need to get comfortable with setting up a persistence volume so you can save some of these files that you'll be creating or using, especially things like your public and private keys for your PGP applet. You'll definitely want to be able to save those. Other than that, of course, if you have any more questions about this, you can just head to the Tails website. They have great documentation on each of these different applications and the user interface and how it works and how to navigate it. If you are comfortable with the interface and feel like you have a pretty good handle on Tails, head to the next video lecture where we will talk about creating persistence volumes, after which we'll actually get hands-on with using some of these applications, some of the ones we won't use commonly. I'll just give you a rundown of how they work and what they're used for. And then after that, we should be closing up our section on Tails and starting into learning about Tor, the Tor browser, and onion routing.